Arirang Prime.
I feel great. I could walk forever on a day like this, but that's not going to happen. I can't go any farther, even though there are no signs that say no entry. This isn't an ocean. It's a river that runs through the heart of Korea, the Hangang River. And just across the river is North Korea. The south and the north watch each other warily, with this river running between them. Actually, my friends and my family are really worried because they know that North Korea and South Korea are at war. But because I live in Seoul, we don't really see much of the war going on because nothing much is happening. But now that I'm here and North Korea is so close, it's only about 2 miles and it's kind of scary. You can even see the people who live there if you use the binoculars. The reality of a divided nation is evident, not only on land, but on water at the mouth of the Hangang River. And that's where I'm heading. I'm a German living in South Korea. My initial plan was to stay in Korea for 1 year as an exchange student, but I've been living here for 14 years already. People ask me how I can live without any family in Korea for 14 years. As a citizen of a country that was once divided, I can relate to the situation in Korea. I felt a connection from the beginning, and I carry that feeling with me on this trip. Well, here it says that after the war, about 5 million North Koreans lost their homes. And there's actually a saying here, and it says, "Today the sun is setting again, but tomorrow I'll finally be able to go home, won't I?" So the people who came here, they thought that they'd be able to go back to their loved ones after about a year or 2, but now it's already been 60 years and they still can't go home. And it was the same in Germany, you know, with the wall. People were separated and they were just waiting to see their loved ones again, but they couldn't. And it's been years and years, and it's really sad what war does with people. Starting from the eastern tip of South Korea, the Hangang River traveled 319 miles westwards towards the sea. It is Korea's major river, partly because it passes through the city of Seoul. However, the estuary lies neither in the north nor in the south. It's like the Demilitarized Zone, but on water. Mr. Seo Seung-sok arrives at work. This is Choljuri village at the northernmost tip of the estuary. It's a fishing village on the front line, where the river meets the sea. Mr. Seo casts his nets in these waters. To reach his regular fishing grounds, he must pass through the heavy gates guarded by South Korean Marines. But what's the reason for such checkpoints when it's not even a border crossing? June 25th, 1950. 90,000 North Korean soldiers with Soviet tanks invaded the south. It was the beginning of a tragic civil war. During the 3 years of intense fighting, 4 million soldiers and civilians died on both sides, and 3/4 of the land was laid to waste. Talks continued for 2 years to end the war, but in the end, the two sides could only agree on a ceasefire. Details of the terms were stated in the Korean Armistice Agreement.
한국 전정 협정은 1953년 7월 27일 날 3년 동안 진행된 한국전을 정전 목적으로 그동안 교전 당사자였던 유엔사, 그리고 중국, 북한이 체결한 한국 전쟁을 종료하기 위한 국제법적인 문서입니다.
A 155-mile ceasefire line was drawn across the peninsula. 1.2 miles north and south of the line became the Demilitarized Zone. The problem is the estuary of the Hangang River, where the military demarcation line ends. The tension between the two countries flows in the current of the Hangang River. I only recently learned about this DMZ on water. So I chose to visit the estuary of the Hangang River to see the area for myself. All boats must hoist up a red flag in order to fish in Cholyuri. The flag identifies them as South Korean boats and puts them under the protection of the Marine Corps.
아유, 반가워요. 많이 잡으셨습니까? 많이 잡았네, 너희는. 안 추워요?
Only 16 fishermen continue to fish in Cholyuri.
비슷비슷해.
Before the Korean War broke out, the waters used to attract throngs of fishing boats. But it was also a thriving seaport that supported dynamic foreign trade. But the golden years ended with the war. And now, global warming is reducing the size of the catch. However, throughout the region's history of upheaval and strife, there is one thing that has not changed. In Cholyuri, the river and the ocean meet. Twice a day, when the low and high tides clash, the gentle current surges.
물이 살살살살 뒤집고 만조 되기 전에 2시간만 지나면 아주 홀라당 뒤집어진다는 식으로 물이 아주 흙탕물과 양쪽이 막 뒤집어져서 올라오죠. 배가 뜨면 거기에서 또 휙휙 돌아가요. 배 자체가. 그래서 위험하죠. 그 자체가 뒤집히는 자리가 있고 그냥 흐르는 자리가 있고 그래요.
That is why the locals named the area Cholyuri. Cholyu means a current that turns backward. Where the river and the sea meet, there's bound to be a rich fishing ground. The salinity levels of the waters change, creating an environment that supports a thriving ecosystem. In the winter season, gray mullet is the main catch. From spring to early summer, river puffers will fill the fishing nets. And when autumn comes, there will be crabs and shrimps to catch. By now, the fishermen know better than to expect a full boat. Even under the best conditions, they count themselves lucky if they can take in a haul of 10 kilos.
그때는 물반 고기반이에 들었다고. 고기가 그냥 여름에 그냥 농어, 황복, 메기, 뱀장어 여기 무지하게 많이 나는데 여기가.
The catch is dwindling every year. Higher sea temperatures caused by global warming are driving the fish out. The fishermen of Cholyuri are worried. They would have a better chance of catching more fish if they could take their boats farther out into the sea, but that's only wishful thinking. They are not allowed to cross the yellow buoys.
여기가 저기서 노란 부표 있어요. 거기가 이제 어랑계선인데 저 밑에 이상 내려가면 이북 쪽으로 내려가기 때문에 내려가지 못해요 저희가. 요 뒤로 서울 쪽으로 이제 조업을 하죠.
The fishing area in Cholyuri is restricted to about 0.6 miles from the dock. The disputed sea border keeps them from going any farther. After coming all the way to Cholyuri, I wasn't going to turn back with an empty stomach. Where else would I be able to eat freshly caught grey mullet? Since mullets are tastier in the winter, people from all over the country come here at this time of the year. The grey mullet is sold at $8 per kilo, which is cheaper than what it costs at a fish market. Even though it's long past lunchtime, the restaurant is packed. All customers are here to eat raw grey mullet, a local delicacy. Korean people eat raw fish with red pepper paste or soybean paste, usually wrapped in letters. Trying the local food is part of the fun of traveling. Although I've come alone, local fishermen keep me company. The sea route of the Hangang River estuary was blocked after the Korean War. But the fishermen believe that they will be able to travel that route one day.
언제까지 계속 가실 거예요?
많은 데까지 나갈게요. 많은 데까지. 앞으로 이제 얼마까지나 할 건지 모르지.
I'm quite lucky to come across a farmer's market that opens once every 5 days. Traditional markets in Germany open on designated days of the week, but in Korea, there are markets that open every 5 days. This market is Yangguk, which has a history of over 100 years. I just wanted to take a look around, but one merchant caught my eye. An old lady selling fresh vegetables she grows on her farm.
그러면은 이거는 어떻게 먹어요?
밥에 먹는 거예요.
밥에다가.
요거 저게 콩 저거 10가지 섞인 콩이야.
아, 네.
저거 섞어서
이렇게 섞여서요?
저거 콩하고 콩이 저기 10가지가 섞였어. 그래서 오곡밥 먹는 날이야.
그러면은 좋은 일만 생겨요?
그렇지.
아.
Although I have nothing to buy from her, I take a seat beside her and strike up our conversation.
이쁘잖아 손이.
어머님도 손이 이쁘세요.
50년을 장사를 했는데.
She reminds me of my grandmother in Germany.
똑같아 큰 걸로 가져갔어.
My grandmother was born in East Germany. All of my relatives on my mother's side are from the East. But my grandmother fled to West Germany before the Berlin Wall fell. She risked her life to cross the border and succeeded. She settled down, got married, and had my mother. The unification of East Germany and West Germany came much later. I was 13 years when it occurred.
네, 동그래서.
갔다 왔어?
네, 갔다 왔어요. 근데 좀.
The vegetable seller experienced the Korean War firsthand. Although more than half a century has passed, the memories of the war are still an open wound for her. Divided into North and South by an armistice agreement, this is the tragic reality of Korea. It took 45 years for Germany to become reunited. The Berlin Wall fell in 1989, and reunification came true 1 year after that. Korea is on a different path. The two sides have been on ceasefire for 61 years. Technically, they are still at war. I was really impressed and really touched by that because they reminded me of my own grandmother and after the war and when she came to West Germany, how hard she had to work, and so those people really touched my heart. The war left deep scars in the survivors. Displaced people cannot return to their hometowns, which lie just across the river. Separated families have been waiting for over 60 years to be reunited with their loved ones. The division of the land has led to the division of the people. I take a road that leads north. It's closed off by a barricade and only opened after a strict inspection. It's a civilian control zone. I have to pass the inspection like any other Korean.
출입 절차에 따라 신분증 좀 확인하겠습니다.
아, 신분증이요? 네. 여기 여권 있습니다.
잠시만 기다려 주십시오.
네. Now I'm getting closer to the military demarcation line.
안녕히 계세요.
To protect the military installations in the area, every person passing through must undergo an ID inspection. In this tightly controlled area, there are about 37,000 people living in more than 100 villages. Invari village is one of them. I smell something burning as I approach the village. There seems to be a fire nearby.
안녕하세요.
네, 수고 많으세요.
아, 여기서 뭐 하고 계세요?
아, 이거는 이제 눈두렁 태우기라고요.
네.
작년에만 해도 이제 그 변멸구 같은 것이 상당히 극성을 부렸거든요. 그래서 그걸 예방하기 위해서 지금 이제 드렁 태우기라는 중이에요.
아, 네.
예. 옛날서부터 이제 손주들이 이 정월 대보름을 이제 기준으로 해서 이 드렁 태우기를 했습니다.
네.
거기다 놓으시면 타.
그러면은 그냥 다 넣어요?
예, 이게 다
In Korea, there is a national holiday called Jeongwol Daeboreum. It falls on January 15th of the lunar calendar. I forgot that today was Daeboreum. The kind villagers invite me to their home. They've prepared 5-grain rice and seasoned vegetables. 5-grain rice consists of rice, barley, millet, beans and sorghum. The villagers share the food with others and pray for peace and a bountiful harvest in the coming month.
마을 안녕과 건강과 각 가정의 평화를 위해서 모두 주민 여러분들의 건강을 위해서 건배!
Most of the villagers were born and raised here. Many of the elders vividly remember the peaceful times in the village before the war broke out.
이 뒤에 가면 고기 무척 많은 데가 여기예요. 무척 많아. 뭐 꽃게니 문이 없는 거 없어. 집에서 반찬은 가져갈 것도 없어. 가서 잡아서 그냥 끓여 먹는 거야, 배 위에서.
The peace was shattered on June 25th, 1950. That fateful dawn is seared into their minds.
6.25 사변 터지는 날이 새벽 한 2시쯤 됐는데 그냥 이 총성이 귀에 울려와 잠을 못 잤어. 그래 산 너머로 그냥 계속 불덩어리가 넘어가는 게 포를 쏘는 거야. 꽝꽝 소리가 나는데
Since Inwari village is close to North Korea, it felt the full brunt of the invasion. Within minutes, the whole village was ablaze as North Korean soldiers, led by Soviet tanks, raided the place. Peace returned to the village, but now it lies in a restricted area for civilians. Because of their isolation and constant fear of another attack, the village elders are constantly thinking about reunification.
아니요, 지금은 없어요. 지금은 없다. 통일하고 나서는 없어요. 네. 근데도 지금 보시면은 지금 메르켈 총리 있잖아요, 독일에서 그 여자분이 그분도 원래는 통독 사람이었어요. 그래서 통독에서 태어나고 자르고 지금 독일 전체 총리인데요. 얼마나 대단하세요.
그러니까 우리나라도 빨리 그렇게 통일이 돼서 하나로 뭉쳐야 하는데.
Even as they hope for reunification, they question whether it's within their reach. Rising from the ashes of war, South Korea achieved astounding economic growth. The next agenda for the nation is peaceful reunification. But from across the river, North Korea continues to shoot down any hopes of reunification with saber-rattling tactics. Well, this place kind of reminds me of the wall in Berlin, because you have to imagine in some places there were stairs where people could go up and look over to East Germany. And so many people were actually putting their vacations so that they could visit that place and just take a look at East Germany. And everybody was so desperate for unification and waiting so much, and they went up there and looking there, hoping to see family or friends or just in general people. The walls of the Peace Observatory are covered with notes. Messages that express the grief and suffering of separated families and displaced people. I also know about the pains of a divided country. People in West Germany, they were so happy that the people from East Germany came over, so that even if they didn't know each other, everybody was just hugging each other because they were so happy that we were finally one again and finally could be together again. I truly pray for the peaceful reunification of Korea. To the people who wish for reunification, both the North and the South are just their home countries. I would also like to live in a unified Korea. But the problem is North Korea. North Korea has repeatedly threatened the peace of even the Hangang River estuary. Due to these incursions, the South Korean army stays on high alert by the Hangang River estuary. There's no way of telling what could happen next. The 2nd Division of the Marine Corps guards the Hangang River estuary. Their mission is to keep the area safe. Because the river is close to the capital city, the Marines are burdened with a heavy responsibility.
저희 해병대 제2사단은 불과 강 하나를 사이에 두고 북한군과 직접 대치하고 있습니다. 이에 중대 장병총호는 항시 긴장의 끈을 놓지 않고 철통 경계의 자세로 경계 근무에 임하고 있으며 만약 적이 도발한다면 1점 불사의 자세로 적을 경멸하여 대한민국을 수호하겠다는 마음가짐으로 경계 근무에 최선을 다하고 있습니다.
The estuary has been the site of many skirmishes between the two sides. For the safety of the nation, surveillance is around the clock and permits not a single moment of rest. But not all has been hostile here. 24 years ago, one incident triggered a brief episode of cooperation between the two sides. In 1990, a dike in the Hangang River estuary burst due to heavy floods. After communicating with North Korea, a South Korean commercial ship was permitted to repair the dike. It was the first time a South Korean boat was allowed into the waters of the Hangang River estuary. Another meaningful incident occurred several years later in 1996 on Yudo Island. That year was hit by another flood, and the overflowing river swept an unexpected guest to Yudo Island. It was a calf from the North Korean side. It had survived the flood by landing on Yudo, but was threatened to starve on the uninhabited island. So the South Korean Marines sailed to Yudo Island to rescue the calf, which was duly named the Ox of Peace by the press and became the most beloved animal in the nation. It later bred with a South Korean cow and had 7 calves and died of old age in 2006. I really like the story about the cow, because here on the one hand you have the Han River, which is the border between two countries which are at war, and then again you have the cow and the South Korean soldiers who want to rescue it and the North Korean soldiers who let them, and you can tell how both sides really value the life of that one cow. So I think it's actually a great symbol for the striving towards peace. It was an unexpected event that thawed the relations between the two sides. Many South Koreans began predicting that reunification was imminent. It seemed like a definite progress towards peace. Thriving with life, the Hangang River is getting ready for spring. There are many small islands around the estuary. Passengers must fill out forms before they board a ferry to one of the islands. I'm no exception. My next destination, Kyodongdo Island, is also within the civilian control zone, so there are many procedures I must follow. I've been on many boats before, but it's my first time on the bridge. The captain kindly granted me this special privilege. 얼마 동안 일하고 계셨어요?
35년이요.
35년이요? 하루 종일 왔다 갔다 하세요?
그렇죠.
얼마 걸려요, 거기까지요?
15분.
15분이요? 그리고 다리 하나 생긴다고 들었는데요. 다리요?
다리죠. 완공됐잖아요.
The bridge connects the ferry dock to Kyodongdo Island. Once it's opened in June, it will spell the end for the ferry service. Immediately after the Korean War broke out, Kyodongdo Island became full of North Korean refugees who had sailed southward on rafts. It was close enough to the mainland that people could safely reach it even on flimsy makeshift rafts. At one time, the population of refugees exceeded the islanders by 3-1. Those refugees settled down and opened shops at the Harirang market. The market did quite well during the war, but those days have long been forgotten. It's so empty, it's deserted. Like many people, the young people, they go into the big cities, so only the old people are left here. And it seems so sad if you think about it that at one time this is going to be forgotten. Nobody will remember this town, and even though it was so important during the war, and that's what worries me most. There's one barber shop that stands out in the quiet market alley. 안녕하세요. 저 미리아라고 하는데요. 여행하러 들어왔는데요. 잠깐 들어와도 될까요?
들어오세요.
감사합니다.
네, 주시다 않으세요.
네, 신발 벗을까요?
안 벗어도 돼요.
It's been in business for 50 years. I've never seen a barber shop this old, neither in Germany nor in Seoul. It seems to belong more to the past than to the present. 원래 고향 어디세요?
고향 바로 건너 황해도 연백이라는데 연백이는 거기 유명한 뭐냐 쌀이 많이 나 곡창지대야. 이 서울 사람들이 황해도에서 연백에서 쌀 안 올려보내서 굶었다고 그래서 그 정도 좋은 데서 살았지.
The barber is a displaced person from North Korea. His hometown is just across the river. 진짜 고향이랑 그렇게 가깝게 사시는데 그래도 못 가시겠네요.
가고 싶어도 못 가는 거지.
그러니까요. 엄청 힘드실 텐데요. He arrived on Kyodongdo Island as a 15-year-old refugee and did all kinds of odd jobs until he became a barber. He set up his own barber shop with his savings, and business was so good at the time that he even had 2 assistants working for him. When the war came to a hiatus after 3 years, he believed he could return to his hometown. But now Mr. G says he fears his hopes are dashed. A villager has come to meet me on the road. He leads me to his home. Mr. G's friend, Mr. Hangleha, is another displaced person from the north. I've only come to listen to his stories, but I'm lucky. Mr. Hang and his wife are making dumplings, one of my favorite foods. I offer to help, but it's not as easy as it looks.
근데 저 모양이
괜찮아 모양.
여기가 조금 나오고.
The dumplings they make are bigger than normal.
모든 게 다 커. 송편도 여기 조금 요만하잖아요. 2분 이만해요. 송편도. 그래서 크게 만드는 거이 그 황해도 사람들은 아마 그 큰 걸 좋아하는지 크게 모든 게 다 크게 만들어.
아니야 못생기 그거 잘못됐어.
The thin flour wrapper is stuffed with pork, tofu, kimchi, and bean sprouts. What determines the taste of the dumplings is a filling,
which is good enough to be eaten by itself. The dumplings taste the best steamed or cooked in a soup. Mr. Hwang was 10 years old when he fled from the war with his entire family. But his mother and 2 sisters went back to the north for what was supposed to be a brief trip.
만두 이쁘게 하니까 아이도 이뻐요?
저 따끔한 빛이 반짝반짝 나는 놋그릇이라고 있어. 그거를 땅에다 묻고 나왔는데 그거 살림 정리를 하러 들어가다고 딸들을 데리고 들어간 거예요. 우리 누님하고 내 여동생 하나하고. 근데 들어가고 나서 딱 스톱이 되고 말한 거야. 그래서 지금 64년을 못 보고 있는 거예요. 지금도 이 머리에 딱 잡혀 있어. 한번 보면 그냥 알 수 있을 것 같아요. 그림이 아주 지우질 않아. 근데 어머니는 돌아가셔서 그런지.
한 번은 깜짝 놀랐어. 난 아주 우리 할아버지 때문에. 그냥 어머니를 부르고 하는데 정말 못 당하였더만. 떼글떼글 땅바닥에서 굴르는데 그 옆에 할머니 섰건 나 섰건 그냥 서서 울었대니까 뭐 일으켜도 뭐 일어나지도 않고 그냥 엄마가 보고 싶다고 그냥 그렇게 우는데 진짜 딱하더만.
Mr. Hwang built his house on a hill so he could see his old hometown from the living room. His mother lives somewhere over the hills.
어머니가 보고 싶어서 꿈에도 한번 볼까 하고. 그래 누가 어머니 부르는 게 제일 소원이야. 보고 싶고. 한번 불보고 싶고.
These days, you can buy frozen dumplings at the supermarket and reheat them for a quick meal. But Mr. Hwang likes making them with his wife. This bowl of dumpling soup is more than just an everyday meal to him. It's his memories of his mother and hometown.
아니 통일이 돼서 뭐 핵무기 없이 사람이 서로가 요 좁은 땅덩어리 왕래를 못하게 사니 그게 뭐 사람 사는 거예요. 전국을 그래도 왔다 갔다 할 수 있게끔 사는 거예요. 국민의 한 도리지. 도리가 사는 거지. 이게 좁은 땅덩어리도 못 갔다 갔다니 미국도 가고 저 중국도 가고 다 가는데 왜 요 조그만 나라를 못 가냐고. 그러니까 뭐 무엇보다 다 통일이 돼서 서로가 왕래를 하는 게 좋다 이거예요.
It's not that he won't go. He can't go. For Mr. Hwang, every day is a struggle. Just across the river lies Mr. Hwang's old village. His mother lives only 2 miles away from Gyeongdo Island.
어머니! 어머니!
She can't hear him. Mr. Hwang believes that his mother passed away many years ago. A divided country tore the mother and son apart and neglected their pains for too long.
All the people who came here were just waiting for unification. And then unification didn't come. And now more than 60 years have passed and unification still hasn't come, so those people are still waiting. But none of them are depressed or have a negative outlook. They all have a positive outlook. They all look into the future. And it really impressed me and touched me how much these people, what a positive outlook they have.
I believe that family brings happiness by merely being in our lives. That's probably why the grief of a separated family is so hard to bear. I'm on my way to Maldo Island, the last destination. There's no regular ferry service. A government boat that stops by the island 3 times a week is the only mode of transportation available. Maldo is not only a remote island, but also a part of the civilian control zone. Located at the tip of the Hangang River estuary, the small island has an area of 1,449 square kilometers. About 16 people live on the island. Each house accommodates 2 households so that it's easier to alert the villagers in the event of a North Korean attack. The coastline extends for 3.7 miles. And North Korea's largest salt farm lies less than 3.7 miles away. There is an interesting signboard here, perhaps because of the island's close proximity to North Korea.
It says, "Welcome to South Korea. Shout as loud as you can and we will escort you to a safe area." It really gives you the impression that North Korea is really close, like a good swimmer could make it over here in no time and be safe.
During the low tide, it's a mere 1.8 miles from the nearest North Korean shore to Maldo Island. As the saying goes, it's so near, yet so far. Suddenly, I see some people in the distance. I wonder what they are doing.
안녕하세요. 제가 아, 저는 멀리서 독일에서 왔습니다.
뭐
네.
어쩐 일로 오셨어요?
네, 제가 궁금하는데 여기서 뭐 하시나요?
여기서 굴 따는 거예요.
아, 굴이요?
예. 그래서 이 굴이 참 사람 보면은 최고예요.
They are digging up wild oysters. They can make about $30 after 2 hours of gathering oysters.
이렇게 제끼면 돼, 그냥 그대로.
이렇게요?
I give it a try. I've eaten oysters before, but I've never harvested them myself. The oyster picking tool is quite interesting.
Oh, I really like it because it's so, you hit with one side and then you just go around and pick it out with the other side, and it's really smart. And you can tell that it's still an old kind of tool made by the people for the people. And I don't know, I really like it. It's really nice. And it fits good into my hand. 이렇게 당기는 거예요?
됐네.
오, 한꺼번에, 오!
Mr. Kim Kun-dong tells me that I'm one of the few visitors to come by the island in a long time.
이것만 몰라요.
Many of the islanders grow vegetables and gather oysters to make a living. But Maldo Island wasn't always like this in the past.
괜찮아요, 이거?
There used to be plenty of yellow corvina to catch. It tasted better than the other fish and it helped the island prosper.
섬은 좋지만 풍악을 울려가면서 생활을 얻은 곳이 여기야. 그래서 철 따라서 오는 그 어부들이 주민 가구 수보다 더 많았어요. 이 섬 뺑뺑 돌면서. 그래서 아주 살기 좋았는데 유교 나면서부터 여기가 아주 교통도 불편하고 주민들도 끊기고 이러고 있는 거예요, 지금.
A lot has changed with the war. Suddenly, the Hangang River estuary was blocked, and the village became a restricted border area. There are no inns on the island. So Mr. Kim generously invites me to stay at his house and offers me a late-night snack.
맨날 먹어요, 이거. 고구마 잘 안 먹는데 감자는 맨날 먹어요.
None of the neighbors come by after dark. The island is incredibly quiet.
딸들이나 아들이나 자식들 키우면 도시에서 키우게 하지 여건 두나.
근데 그렇게 말씀하신다면 한 50년 뒤에 말도는 무인도 될까요?
아니, 점점 나아지겠지.
무인들은 안 되지. 왜냐면은 그래도 이거 대한민국의 땅덩어리인데 그 무인들을 만들 수가 없고 또 나 같으면도 여기 고향인데
이걸 지켜야지. 근데 자식 때라도 그렇게 만들어가지.
Mr. Kim feels guilty for asking the next generation to look after the island. But he's 75 years old and his best years are behind him. That was my trip to the Hangang River estuary, the DMZ on water. Now it's time to return to Seoul.
You know, before I came here, I thought of the border to North Korea more or less as a land border, and I never really considered the Hangang estuary. But here, seeing how important the Hangang is for these people, it doesn't only have a historical importance, it's also economy and for the ecosystem. It's really important for the ecosystem as well. I was really impressed by the people who make their living here. You have so many different people. And you know, back in Germany, I was too young to really experience how life with the border was. But now I feel so much closer to my past that I come here, and it was a really important journey for me.
This estuary used to be a prosperous place, but it all changed when conflicts resulted in a standoff between the two countries. Now it has become a DMZ on water. It's difficult, perhaps impossible, to know exactly what they are going through. Nonetheless, I too feel the grief and suffering of Koreans living on a divided land. I hope that their lives will one day be reunited, not in the south or the north, but in one homeland, Korea.